a chance to look at the demo video? Shivani? All right. Anyway, let's start the session. I think we'll check with it later. Manoj, I think
Hi.
Shivani has some problems hearing me. Hi, Manoj. How are
Hi.
you?
Good.
Just give me a minute. Let me check with this lady.
Okay.
What is the problem? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right, folks. I think Shivani, can you hear me now? Let's start. We already wasted like 20 minutes. Hi, Manju. Hello. Shivani, you able to hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, great. All right, so let's start. Yeah. So I hope you had a chance to look at the demo. Okay, great. So today I would be starting the first topic, right? So before we get into the actual role of a business analyst, I would spend a few sessions on explaining you how the industry works and the various phases of the project and all. So this is more like an orientation for you if you're coming from a non-IT background, right? So if you're actually from if you don't really understand how industry works or what are the various phases in the project, I think this gives you very good insights into it and more clarity on what your role would be. Okay. So primarily we'll discuss how is a client's IT team organized, right? So what is the structure and what are the functions they do. Then we looked at a typical vendor organization and see how are they structured and how is the project governed, right? Whenever a project is formed, what is the governance structure in a project and what are the roles and responsibilities there as well. Then we'll get into the detailed view of software development lifecycle models, right? So this is nothing but a project. What are the various phases in a project, and what are the variations that we could execute them in? All that we would cover when we talk about the SDLC models. Okay. So this gives you an understanding about who are all the people you will generally deal with, and what are the things that are done in a project right from the start till the end of the project. Okay. So while this is not a course directly responsibility for business analyst, you'll get a better understanding about how things work in the industry. Okay? So that's it. Okay. So if you look at a typical client organization, there would be multiple business units. Right? So usually uh, you'll ensure that your you know just give me a minute. Yeah. So there would be multiple business units with the with the business unit headset. With multiple business units handling each part of the business. Right? So you pick up any business, usually that is how they're structured. There would be business units, and these business units would require some applications or IT systems to perform their business, right? So like let's pick a bank, right? So there would be a system for managing all your deposits functionality. There would be a system to manage all your loans functionality. Then similarly there are multiple such systems. Right? So there is an ATM system, right? So there are multiple systems which the business would need. Now the team themselves are not equipped enough to manage the systems on their own. Okay, so they cannot maintain and ensure that the system is up and running all the time, and if they have to make any modifications or if there are any defects, so they cannot fix it themselves because it requires technical knowledge, right? So there needs to be a team which supports all these functions of managing that applications, supporting all those applications which are used by the business teams. Okay. Now broadly, that is a function of your IT organization in the client. Okay, and they are categorized. There are three main units in that IT team, right? So usually the head of it is the CTO, or sometimes you call it as head of operations and IT, or CIO, right? So multiple names, but usually he heads that overall function of managing that applications, right? And within that, broadly, they are categorized into three main units. So the development team focuses on any new application development or enhancements to the existing application. So if the business teams want any new application, they'll talk to the dev team. Right? So, or if they want some changes to the existing system, some more functionality added to the existing system, they'll come out to them. If there are any defects, that also they'll come out to this team. So that is how the development team would support the applications, right? All new development, enhancements, or any defect fixing, all would happen by this team. Okay, so their primary capability is development. Okay, uh, so they might in turn outsource it to a technology vendor, right? So they will not. Yeah. So they will not. they might not develop it in-house. They might outsource it to a technology vendor. Okay, so once the development is complete, so logically it needs to be tested out. So there is another team which is there for testing. Now usually they're segregated and it's a differentiated responsibility because uh, because there should not be a conflict of interest, right? So for example, if you ask me to develop something and also test something, test the same thing, right? I would always say that it's working perfectly fine. Why do we need to test it, right? Because uh, it's difficult to find faults with our work, right? So usually the teams are segregated. Right? So there is a separate team whose primary focus is on testing. So they know how to test the application and ensure that it is up and running all the time. Okay, they'll figure out all those defects. They again in turn would liaise with the business team as well to ensure that the systems are tested. Okay, and once this testing is done, right? So we would, uh, you know, uh, move it to another team called as an operations team. So what does the operations team do? They would install the application into the final environment. We call that as a production environment, and give access to the end users. So the end users would access the system only, which is managed by the operation system. So they provide all the support. Right? Somebody needs to support the applications. The operations team does that. Okay. So what does all this support include? So if the business team has any request, or maybe they find a defect, whom should they contact? They need to have a toll-free number or an email ID or a help desk, basically, right? The help desk is provided by them. Okay, and at the end of the day, maybe you need to run some programs, or you need to ensure that the system is up and running all the time. Who does that? The operation team does. So overall, it's a responsibility for the operations team to maintain and ensure that the application is running up and running all the time, and support the business users and taking any request. Okay, so that's how a typical IT team is organized, right? Uh, any project you take will go through these three phases. There would be a development, there would be a QA, and then finally handed over to the operations, right? Now each unit is independent, right? So the operations team would not have access to the dev environment. Similarly, dev environment will not have access to the testing or the production environment, right? Why? Because if he has access to this environment, he can just go and then change it in that particular environment. So to avoid that and putting the right controls in place, so usually they uh, you know uh, segregate them. All right. Now, right. So there would also be a technology vendor, like let's say IBM or an Accenture or a TCS, right? Who would be liaising with this team to do the development. Why? Because this team might not have the right technology. Right? So if the bank wants to implement a mobile banking app, so you need people who are well versed in iOS, who are well versed in Android technologies, right? So it's difficult to find them within the organization because you won't have work for them permanently, right? So it's one of a work. So usually they don't have people in house. So what they do is they'll hire some technology vendor to provide those services. Okay. Uh, yeah. So let's look at a typical IT company also. Right. Now you have all these functions about sales, finance, HR, admin, and all. We're not really interested in it. We are more interested in how are projects executed, how are they delivered. Okay. So broadly, there are two ways in which your teams are structured. Okay. horizontals and verticals. So verticals are focused on a particular industry. Okay. Uh, like you have banking industry and healthcare industry, retail industry, right? So they focus on a particular industry. So they understand that needs of that particular industry, and they're experts in that particular right? And then you have these horizontals. Okay, horizontals are experts in a particular technology, like Java, right? .NET, right? Or Pega, or Oracle apps. So there are multiple teams, so which are called as horizontals, and they focus on a particular technology. Okay. Now, uh, so the vertical people are the ones who are actually reaching out to the customers, the client, and then winning new business. So their primary responsibility would be to identify opportunities at that particular client and win business and ensure that the client is happy with it. Right? So they are the face of the customer, or of the IT company, right? So they are the ones who are interacting with them, and you know they would identify opportunities at the client location, and depending on the requirement, they would engage the right kind of horizontal team. Let's say the project they want is Oracle applications based, right? So they will engage the Oracle applications horizontal. If the project is a Java project, so they will reach out to the Java practice. They'll involve people for that. So broadly, so depending on the project type, you'll choose people, and uh, there could be multiple projects in a particular client. Like let's take the example of Citibank, right? Now Citibank would want to implement, let's say, a CRM application, a mobile banking application, and a web-based Java web-based solution, right? Now these are three different teams. Okay, they are three different skill sets, right? So there would be only one guy facing the customer. Citibank, there would be one person from, let's say, Accenture. So Accenture, there would be somebody called as an account manager or a client partner. So he would generally be the face of the customer, right? So he will find out, okay, what are the opportunities what are the projects that you have. Then the guy at Citibank would say, these are the three things that we have. Now tell me how if you can provide people or uh, deliver them, right? So the account manager would talk to his counterparts, horizontal counterparts. He will talk to the Java folks and then say, hey, we will have an opportunity in Citibank. Now I need people for that. And similarly, we'll talk with the CRM team and then say that, okay, we have opportunities there, right? So we'll figure out those people and then onboard onto the project. Okay, that's the role of a client partner account manager, and the horizontal teams would provide those people and ensure that those projects are delivered. Okay, that's a typical way in which a IT company is organized. Okay, so let's look at the governance structure, right? So when there are multiple projects being delivered from the same client, right? Uh, like you know they could for a fairly large client, like let's say a Citibank or a Walmart or a big account, there could even be thousands of concurrent projects running, right? So in a typical scenario, the client could give some hundred or thousand projects to one single vendor, right? So it could have it could have been executing some 100 or 200 projects uh, for Accenture, right? Accenture could be working on those 100 200 projects for Citibank, right? So how do we bring in that structure? Because each project you cannot say, okay, we'll deal it individually, right? So there has to be a structure so that there is a hierarchy and then a escalation matrix, and you look at it at a holistic way rather than each individual projects. So that's where the governance structure comes in. Okay. So broadly, your IT company is organized into in this way, right? So you'd have a on-site team and an offshore team. Okay. Every project generally tends to have that because that's a standard model now. You have that economies of scale, and you get better resources in these offshore locations, right? So that's the main reason most of the IT companies have started following the on-site offshore model. Okay. Um, yeah. So what do they do? They would have an on-site team as well as an offshore team. On-site team primarily consists of the business analyst, right? So since you would be the person who is coordinating with the customer, right? Uh, you would be there. There would be a technical architect, right, or a tech lead. Right? For all technical related discussions, he would be the person who will reach out to the client, right? And depending on the need, there could even be a QA lead. But primarily, this is usually the on-site team is very lean, right? So it won't have too many resources, right? So it generally tends to have the project manager, the business analyst, technical architect, and depending on the project complexity, the numbers could increase. There could be more than one BA or more than one technical lead or technical architects. Okay, so their primary responsibility would be to talk to the client, understand requirements, and then pass it on to the uh, offshore teams. Okay, offshore team usually has tech leads again. Uh, then it has the developers. It has the testers. Okay, so their primary responsibility would be to design the system, develop the system, and test the system. Okay, and then they'll send it back to the on-site team, which in turn would coordinate with the client team to get the UA testing done. Okay, so that's how a typical team is structured. Okay, so if you pick up any project, it will have an on-site offshore team, and you'll have these roles, and that's a functionality there for following. Okay, overseeing them would be the project managers. So usually the project manager is dedicated to a project, and then he will ensure um, you know that the work is going as per the scheduled time and within the cost. Okay. Now, for smaller projects, you might not have an on-site and as well as an offshore project manager. So you might just have one manager, and then the on-site coordinator in case the manager is offshore, or maybe an offshore coordinator if the project manager is on-site, right? So depending on the size of the project, you could have those project managers. Um, you could have two project managers, or there could be one project manager. Then overseeing them are the account and delivery managers. Okay, so all the project managers would report it to the account managers. Similarly, at offshore, all the project managers would report into the delivery managers. Okay, so these guys' responsibilities ensure that all these tasks are completed. Like the delivery manager ensures that the tasks are completed on time. Account manager's primary responsibility would be to liaise with the customer and ensure that the client is happy with the services and also win new business. So that's how the typical responsibilities are. Okay. Over and above them are the delivery heads, and then the account heads of the industry heads. Okay. So they have those periodic reviews of at an account level, and then see how is it growing, and then they would review the account status and all. Okay. On the customer side, you'll have a project team which constitutes representation from these three teams: the dev, QA, and ops, and the business team. Right. So all your functional requirements would come in from the business team. Then these guys would handle the rest of the functions, like the development standards and the testing activities, and then the operational readiness. All that would come in from these teams. Okay, so
all your requirements generally would come in from the client side, and it's a group of people coming from various units, right? So there would be presentation from the business side, from the development side, from the testing side, and the operation side. Okay? So you as a business analyst and the technical lead would interact with them, understand all the requirements, right, and pass it on to the technical lead. Okay. Now we'll get into more details about how we do that, but that's the broad structure. Okay. Then you have the project managers and the business unit managers also, right? There would be a head of this business unit or maybe a one level below him who would actually oversee the requirements and then review it and he would provide feedback if something is wrong there, right? So all that review thing would be happening as part of the business, would be done by the business unit manager, right? And over and above them, you have the steering committee, which has the BU heads and then the overall the CTO or the CIO, what we're talking about. Okay, so that is how a typical project governance is structured, right? There would be a PMO. I think we've looked at it over here as well. Right? It's basically tracks whether all the projects are running smoothly, all the billing is being done correctly, and it also handles the reporting function. Right? So it's more like a support function to ensure that things are running smoothly. It's not a primary unit which handles work there. Okay, so clear about this, the various teams at least, what they do in the project. Any questions over here?
Yeah, clear.
All right. Now that we at least understand the basic structure of how typically the client and then IT organizations are structured, let's spend some time understanding how are projects awarded or how are they won, right? So usually you're not getting a project given by the client to you directly, right? So there would be a competitive bid. Okay, so they will want to take the risk, they want to get the best deal, right? Let's say if Citibank is there, Citibank is not just going to say, okay, no, I'll give this project to Accenture, right? It will say, these are my requirements, and it will tell all those vendors, okay, these are my requirements, now give me a solution. Now the rest of the vendors who are responding would give their solution and then their pricing, which the Citibank would evaluate, and then finally take a decision on it, right? And choose one vendor, right? So a typical competitive bidding process happens, right? So let's spend some time on from the point a project is conceptualized till the budgets are approved, and then a vendor is identified. What is the process? Let's try to spend some time understanding that. Then we would move on to your typical SDLC, right? So whatever we are learning happens before you even get into a project. Okay. Yeah. Just give me a minute. All right. So usually the projects are conceptualized by this team, right? Or business unit teams, right? So there could be multiple people in this. Somebody could come with an idea, or sometimes there would be a separate team. Okay, so which will again fall under the CTO or maybe under the dev team somewhere, right? And you as a business analyst could also be part of this team, right? So usually there would be enterprise architects, and there's a chance that you could directly join as a business analyst at the client location, right? So the role of a business analyst is always not with a IT firm like Accenture or TCS. The clients themselves could have a business analyst in house, right? Like Citibank would have a business analyst in house. So what they do is they identify opportunities what can be taken up. Okay, so let's say Citibank is interested in a mobile banking app. Mobile banking app. Okay, so the request could come in from maybe the retail banking unit, and then say, I need this app developed, or it could come in from from the EA and the BA team, right? So from the dev team, and then say, hey, these are the trends happening in the industry. I think we should implement one mobile banking app. Right? So that opportunity would come out from one or two teams. Right? Now, once they identify the opportunities, nobody is going to say, okay, that's a great idea. Let's here are your $10 million or $5 million. Go ahead and implement it. So they're not just going to say that, right? So you need to have clear clear plan, and you need to identify what are the investments that you have to make, what are the benefits you would get. Right? So somebody has to do a cost-benefit analysis, right? Or prepare a business case. Right? So basically, you will figure out what are all the features that should be there in this application, and why would you need that application? How is it aligned to your strategic goals? And then how much would it cost? What the benefits you would get? Right? So that some initial research has to be done, which is generally coming out in a business case document. So the first step is generally a project or a need is identified, and then a business case is prepared for that. Okay. So the business case would be a combination of your business team, and then there could be a BS. If there are BAs involved, you could get involved in this work as well. So all that would constitute your enterprise analysis. Okay. More detail about that later of how do we do it. Now what we are focusing is what is it that is done in a typical project. Okay. How we would do it and the details thereof would be discussed in detail in the following sessions. Okay, so a business case document is prepared, then then it's presented to the business unit head. Okay, so you'll say that this project would cost you $2 million, but if you implement, our customer base could increase by another 5%. So which in turn would increase the revenue, right? So you're trying to justify why would need to implement that application, right? So once the the business unit head is convinced, he feels that okay, there is a good opportunity here to invest. He would allocate the budgets. Okay. Now once the budgets are allocated, then you can go ahead and then start the project. Okay. Now, overall, even if you are clear about that, okay, this project might take you some $2 million, right? So that's at a very high level estimate. You have not done a very detailed analysis, right? It's a very high level. You're saying that around $2 million would be the cost. Okay. Now, somebody has to actually implement it, and you will not have enough resources, especially who are experts in this mobile banking technology, to to implement that particular project. So what do? You would want to give it to some technology vendors like Accenture or maybe an IBM or a Cognizant, whatever it is. Right? So you want to involve it. Now, whom all will you reach out to? Right? So there are hundreds of or even thousands of technology vendors. Right? I cannot go and then talk to them for each and every project, right? What are the billing rates I should talk about, and what is the? So I don't want to get into all those negotiations every time for each and every project, right? So what I would do as a client is I will pick up some 4 or 5 vendors and then say, these are my preferred vendors. Any project I get, I'll only reach out to these 4 or 5 people and not all the 1,000 people in the world. So let's say Citibank figured out, okay, broadly based on my needs, I think these are the 5 guys which are a good fitment. So they would evaluate them, and then let's say they figured it out. Okay, IBM is one, Accenture is one, then This should be TCS, all right, and Infosys, and let's say a smaller company like Mindtree, right? Now there is no limit that it has to be some 3 or 5 or 10. So there could be some 10, 15 vendors also for some, right? But they do a detailed evaluation of each of these vendors. They agree on those rate cards, on what are the billing rates, right? So what are the terms of engagement? All that is agreed in a document called as an MSA. Okay, it's called as Master Service Agreement. Okay, so typically, this is done once in 5 years or once in 3 years. Right? So every 3 years, you will say, you will renegotiate those contractual terms, and then either have that contract with that particular vendor, or you might even take him off. Okay, so that's the first step, which starts the relation between a customer and a IT vendor. Right, an MSA document is signed. It's a contractual document, and it's not specific to a particular project. So it's not talking about a mobile banking application or a CRM application. It's not talking about it. It's talking about the general terms. You'll say, this is the billing rate, and then these are the SLAs that you'll have to agree to. These are the terms and conditions, and these are your inflation rates, and then these are your additional costs. All those details are covered in that MSA document. Right? So you don't really need to worry about it. I'm just giving you a context. You don't need to know what goes into an MSA. It's a very high level document, which captures all the account or client to client, client and vendor relationship details. Okay. So then what happens is, once the budgets are approved, so the team would prepare a document called as an RFP. Okay. So the RFP is basically, it stands for request for proposal. So it's more like a tender process, right? So you don't want to give it to one single person, because you'll not be sure whether you're getting the best rates or not. So what do? You will say, what, I have this mobile banking app, and then I will give it to all these 5 guys to respond. Okay. So I'll put my high-level requirements in a document, which we call it as a RFP, and ask these guys to respond. Okay. So all these guys would respond to the RFP with the details of their solution, and how they are going to execute it, and what is their pricing and all. So all those details are covered in the response. Okay. So the client would evaluate all those responses. So it looks at those responses from IBM, Accenture, TCS, and Mindtree, and then say, what, out of all these responses, I liked Accenture. Okay. So the overall solution, what they have given, or the pricing they have given, I like Accenture the best. All right. So they will evaluate these responses and then figure out one vendor whom they want to go ahead for this particular project. Okay. So once that vendor is identified, they would sign a project-specific contract called as a SOW, Statement of Work. Okay. Now this is a contractual document. Again, so it's specific to a particular project. It will tell you what exactly are the features that should be delivered as part of your mobile banking application, right? What are the timelines that you have agreed? What are the resources working in it? So all the project-specific details are covered, right? So you're not going and talking about the billing rates again, or the SLAs, or the terms and conditions. All those are not discussed at SOW. SOW just focuses on what is the functionality, what are the timelines, what is the total cost, right? And the solution features that you have given in the response. All that would be said that you would deliver this solution to me. Okay, that exactly would be there in your SOW. Okay. So this is where once the SOW is signed off, that's where the core team is onboarded. Okay, wherein your business analyst, project managers, and then the tech leads all would come onto the project. That's where the project would start. Right? All these activities happen before even could get into a project. Okay. So this is just to give you a context, because we will refer to some of these documents like SOW, RFP, and all later. So we need to have a understanding about what happens before even a project is started, or how do we identify the vendors. So it gives you some additional insights into how how do you just give me a minute. All right. So, yeah, before we proceed further, any questions? Do you understand how are the client and vendor organized, and what is the process till you get onto a actual project? Any questions over here? So are you following it, or am I going too fast? So give me some feedback so that we can uh, uh, you know we can take it at your pace. Right? So since this is the first session, I just wanted to take your feedback, whether you guys are following it, or is it too fast? Or if you need if you need me to slow down my pace, so do let me know. Jawad, you want to say something?
No, you're doing fine. You're doing fine. I just wanted. So far, it's pretty straight. I missed like the first 10 minutes, but I got the hang of it where we are.
All right, great. So anyway, you'll get the recorded copy. You can catch it up. In case you have any questions, I generally spend the first 5 minutes, responding to your queries every day. So, if you have any questions from your previous sessions, we spend that time answering your queries. Yeah. So tomorrow, if you, I suggest you can go through the recording today, and then tomorrow you can ask those questions in case you still have some queries. Okay. All right. So if you have to quickly recap, we looked at we looked at how a typical client organization looks like. Primarily, it has 3 teams: a development team taking care of all new development or enhancements to the current system. A testing team will ensure that whatever is developed by the development team is working correctly and is good to go. And then there is an operations system which will maintain those systems on an ongoing basis. Okay, so if some defect is identified, it will coordinate with the customer. With the development team. Then if it needs some additional space, it will allocate those space. And if it has to ensure that it's up and running. If some day jobs needs to be run, they ensure that those backend housekeeping activities are also done. So all those would be part of your IT operations team. Okay. Then you have the business team who would provide you the functional requirements. The budgets would be approved from the business teams for the projects. And a typical IT company would have a horizontals and vertical structure. This is a very general structure. That doesn't mean each and every company would work in the same way, right? So this is by far the largest accepted structure in the IT industry, wherein you have people who are focused on a particular industry. We call them as verticals. Then there are people who are focused on technology. We call them as horizontals. And depending on the project type, you would pick up those people from the horizontals and then carry out the projects, right? So there would be account managers who are aligned to a particular customer, right? And then the delivery managers would look at the offshore work, okay? And within that, then they would have multiple projects, right? So the project managers and then the offshore and on-site teams. On-site team generally would own the communication with the customer. Offshore team would own the design, development, and testing activities. It ensures that the projects are delivered. So that's a typical governance structure, right? Now I'll briefly introduce you to this slide, and then tomorrow we'll go in detail, and then also learn about what are the variants of your software development lifecycle. Okay, all this would be done in the next 1-2 sessions, right? So let me briefly introduce you to this one. So phase 1 is where you would identify the projects. Okay, so all your enterprise analysis work, and then even getting your budgets approved, and identifying a vendor, all that would be part of your project initiation, or even before that, you can call it as phase 0. But phase 1, you have a budgets approved here. The end outcome is you have budgets approved. Then you have team onboarded, right? So the core team, the VA, the project manager, and the technical lead has onboarded, right? So that's the main 2 things which will happen at the end of the phase 1. Okay. Now once we have the budgets and then the team is onboarded, right? So the next what we do is we'll spend some time in planning the project. Okay. So overall, the detailed project plans are prepared, and then you would coordinate with the customer to understand the requirements. Okay, so the requirements are understood, and then a business requirements document is prepared, okay, which has all the detailed requirements. Okay, you pretty much own this document. So there's a lot of contribution which goes in phase 2. As a business analyst, you have a very key role to play in this phase 2 of the project. Okay, so then once the BRD is prepared, then the design would happen. There are generally 2 levels of design, high level and low level design, and it's handled by a technical architect. Okay, so there will be an architect who will create these design documents, and then you would have a development phase or build phase wherein the actual programmers would come in. Okay, so depending on the design documents what are given to them, they would convert it into a particular technology like Java or .NET or whatever it is. Right? So they would write the code and then ensure that each program is tested by them. So that level of testing is called as unit testing. Okay. So then what do? You'll pick up all those individual pieces of code and then consolidate it and test it as one single unit, which is system testing. Okay. Sometimes we call it as system and integration testing as well, SIT. Okay. So broadly, this ensures that all those pieces which are individually tested are working together as a consolidated unit. Okay. This again is the responsibility of the QA team. Right. And then once you do the testing, you take it to the customer. The customer would do one round of testing to ensure that all the requirements what was given in the BRD are delivered as part of your final testing. And once they're satisfied with this, they would sign off the UAT and then give approvals. So once the approvals are taken, then the ops team takes over. Right? So ops team would set up the production environment. They would install the application and then create the user IDs and then ensure that everything is ready to go. Right? They would give access to those end users, and then the system would be live. So we call that as a go live. Right? So that's a milestone that we have. And once the system is live, right? So the maintenance phase kicks off. Okay. So this phase 7 is also ops team's responsibility. Okay. So more about it, I'll talk about in detail in tomorrow's session. I'm just giving you an overview here. Right. So guys, one small request is please join in on time so that we would utilize that full 1 hour. because I have hard stops. I can spend more than 10 15 minutes additionally, right? So if you join late, we would actually be losing out on the time, right? So request all of you to please ensure that you join in right on time, right? I think I hope all you guys are clear on the time, right? I
Yeah.
actually joined a few minutes late today, but that won't happen starting tomorrow, right? So try to join on time, and then we'll spend the whole 1 hour learning stuff. Okay.
Okay.
Any questions? Any feedback? Anything which you want to share? Since this is the first session, I would want to take your feedback. How things are going? Are you good with it?
No, will we be getting these slides or I don't know?
Yes. There will be a lot of training material
Okay.
which will be provided to you. I think your coordinator would let you know. You'll get all
Okay.
these slides. There will be a lot of reading material as well. Right?
Exactly. Already. Okay.
Read further to whatever we discussed. So whenever I cover that particular topic, I'll tell you what to read. There will be a lot of
Sure.
templates, right? So each and every deliverable that you're, that document that you're creating, so there is a template for it. So we'll discuss that template as well, and this would act as a reference. So you know exactly what you are expected to do there. Right?
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah. So it's structured that way. You'll get access to this, by your training coordinator would let you know.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Okay, I got a couple of questions. So these videos and PowerPoints and all the course material, which website is it?
So I'll provide you the access to that website, Manoj, right? So it will be uploaded onto a drive, and then you'll have access to it on the portal. Right? So I have your email ID. I'll ensure that you have access to the conversation. Okay.
Okay, secondly, because thing is on Tuesdays and Thursdays I have class around here at that time. So that's why I was asking. Tomorrow is Thursday. The rest of the days is no problem for me. I can join in.
Okay. So yeah.
Time.
All right. So anyway, your the recording should be there for you. And so you can spend your time reviewing those recordings.
Right, right. But the thing is, which website is it? Is it, you still have
I'll provide
to?
you. You'll get an email with all those details, Manoj. Right?
All right, awesome. All right, and I got one more little issue with the mic. Sometimes the sound it gets like low. I don't know if everybody was experienced that or maybe it was me.
So
but that's a side
sometimes
issue.
that could be a problem at GoToMeeting, but usually it's a problem with our systems, right? So if you find that it's persistent and do let me know, because sometimes it's a problem from my side as well. No but that's one in a case. I don't think it.
Yeah, that's a side issue. Doesn't another one thing?
I was experiencing the same problem, Raju.
Okay.
It was getting silent.
Okay. So I don't know. You guys should have informed me earlier. I could have checked the mic. But do let me know going forward at least, so that you won't have. So generally that problem won't be there. So maybe today there could be some issues. But
okay, now
this is for the past 3-4 years.
Go ahead.
This would be one of those times. Okay.
Yeah, I think this is the problem with maybe the GoToMeeting, this software thing.
Yeah. So, but if you find this problem, do let me know. I'll please repeat that or ensure that I check my mic and adjust that so that the problem is resolved. It is on my side. Okay. So.
Okay, I got one last question. Let's say you end up working at Citibank, or just for the example of it. The business analyst, this training we're doing now, this is it could be my first question is business analyst. Is it only in IT department, or there's other departments too, right? Obviously.
See, analyst is a very vaguely used term. Almost every industry would have the different rules.
I understand that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, like if you look at a financial analyst, right, he would actually be looking at a balance sheet and then figuring out whether.
No, that part I understand. My main question is like this training we're doing right now. This is applicable to only IT department, or less, 2 months from now when I find a job, it could have been in any department. This training will make me ready for anything.
It could be for all industries. So it would be like, you could work in a banking industry or a healthcare industry or a retail industry.
Right. That's basically my question. I would be ready for any
industry, yes.
Yeah.
Right. So you would be able to work on any IT project across industries. So it's not
Okay.
specific to one industry. Right? Because the kind of work we do is not specific to a particular industry. Right? So any IT project which is implemented, would go through the same steps, and that's the role of a business analyst would be the same.
Okay, and it doesn't matter what you're dealing with. You have certain duties and
Right.
do that. Okay.
Okay. All right, then let's connect tomorrow again, same time, and then we'll take it down from there.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.